So what is your
And
best depiction of Napoleon then?
there are several. And in fact, Le Figaro magazine, newspaper, one of the biggest ones in France, did a listing of the 100 best Napoleons in film.
Oh
And
my gosh.
I don't want to brag, but I made number 27
All right.
in my role with Vincent Cassel in the Emperor of Paris. And Joaquin Phoenix was 28.
Welcome to Talk with History. I'm your host, Scott, here with my wife and historian, Jenn.
Hello.
Now, our regular listeners may remember some of our Watch with History series where we talk about the historical facts and fiction of some of your favorite movies. We've only done a couple, but we were glad to bring it back today. So on today's Watch with History episode, we're diving into the world of cinema to dissect and discuss the much anticipated 2023 film Napoleon, a cinematic journey into the life and times of the legendary French emperor. Join us as we unravel the threads of history woven into this blockbuster, exploring the triumphs, the tribulations, and the undeniable charisma of one of history's most captivating figures.
3, 2, 1.
Now, what makes this episode extra special is that we have a fantastic guest on board, a man who doesn't just study history, but lives and breathes it. The renowned Napoleon reenactor, Mark Schneider. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Mark brings a unique perspective to the table, having donned the iconic bicorn hat and stepped into the boots of Napoleon himself. Get ready for some incredible insights from someone who's literally walked in the emperor's shoes. So, Mark, thank you again for joining us. We're really excited to have you. Jenn's been talking about this for weeks now, and we both finally got to see the movie. So can you kind of tell us, our audience, a little bit about who you are, kind of the different figures that you reenact for, and kind of how you came about to playing the part of Napoleon for quite some time.
Absolutely. And thank you again for having me. So the Napoleon character has been a lifelong passion. My mother used to say, and my mother was French and my dad's American, that's my French connection. My mother would often say that she never knew a time that I was not interested in Napoleon. I just seemed to have this fascination. One of my French cousins gave me a little toy soldier of Napoleon. He's actually right up here. When I was 2 or 3 years old, and I was hooked ever since. When kids at school had Batman and Superman on their desk, I had Napoleon on my desk.
That's
So
awesome.
one day I came home from school and I was really upset because I've always been short and people made fun of my shortness and my big nose. And my mother said to me, the only people who are short and have big noses are kings and emperors. And so maybe that was the catalyst to make me become Napoleon, because I collected everything Napoleon, read everything I possibly could on him. I war gamed, I ran around town as one of his soldiers. But it wouldn't be until I became an adult when I started to actively pursue reenacting, and I was given the opportunity to become Napoleon. I actually was in the U.S. Army, and 2 weeks after I got out, I came to Colonial Williamsburg to work at the largest living history museum in the world.
Yeah.
And I joined this reenacting group, which was outside of Colonial Williamsburg, and we portrayed Napoleon's 7th Hussars, which was a French cavalry regiment during the Napoleonic Wars. Well, one event we did, they needed somebody to portray Napoleon. And I had attended the Napoleonic Society of America conference, and I had acquired a costume that was worn by Albert Dieudonné in the 1927 silent film Napoleon.
Oh, cool.
And it fit me perfectly.
Oh,
It
my
was
gosh.
incredible. In fact, it fit me so well that the guy who was selling it gave me this ridiculous discount. He's like, you're meant to have this.
Oh, that's
And I
cool.
picked up the iconic bicorn and put the rest of the kit together, and I started portraying Napoleon. It became very, very popular. We did History Channel documentaries, and we were given opportunities to do a bit of traveling, did the Louisiana Purchase with Thomas Jefferson. But in 2005, I was given a phone call by a group in Belgium. and they were looking for a Napoleon. In fact, the guy called me. His name was Mark van Meerbeek, and said, "Is this Monsieur Schneider? We would like you to play Napoleon on the battlefield at Waterloo." And I hung up on him because I thought I thought it was like one of my friends, like kidding with me. But he called back, thank goodness, and I sent him a resume, and I started to go to Europe from that moment forward. So in 2005 is where it all really began. I really have to give thanks to Colonial Williamsburg for teaching me the art of living history, of character interpretation, of nation building, as we call it. And because I don't think they had seen that in reenactment before, where you take on the actual role of one of these generals or characters from history and immerse yourself not only with the public but with the reenactors. So that's how it all began. And so it's taken me to Belgium, it's taken me to France, it's taken me to Russia, it's taken me to Germany, to Italy, Spain, Czech Republic. In fact, I'm leaving for the Czech Republic on Wednesday to recreate the Battle of Austerlitz. So that's my background on Napoleon. Of course, I omitted a little bit about my work in Colonial Williamsburg. I've been in the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation for 26 years, and much of that time I have been portraying the Marquis de Lafayette, so another Frenchman who I do on a daily basis in a variety of different performances inside theaters, outdoor theaters, riding horses, immersing the public with the history of the American Revolution and Lafayette's part in it. So that should bring everybody up to date on what I'm all about.
That's perfect. I mean, really showing kind of from, and that's, I mean, you kind of hit all the high points that we ask a lot of our guests. I can tell it's very possible that you've spoken in front of a camera before.
But that's what I was saying. Like you've practiced it so much, and the thing is, you get better the more you do it. And I want to also say, Mark is also an equestrian. He is a fantastic horseman. So it really adds to the role when you play Napoleon and you're on the horse. And you also speak fluent French. And so,
Absolument. Je parle français aussi.
Yes. And so, I mean, again, those things make you so much more authentic to playing those characters.
I think it's one thing to know the who, what, when, where, why, when you were born, what battles you fought in, who are you married to, what were some pivotal moments in your life. But it's something else to immerse yourself into the 18th or 19th century with the things that they did, whether it's, the knowledge of the layout of the city of Paris in 1784 when Napoleon was attending the École Militaire Royale. Or, you can't say, well, I made a left at the Eiffel Tower and then I went by the Georges Pompidou Center, because those things weren't there.
Yeah.
But adding to that is the wearing of the uniform, riding horses. Horses have no patriotism. They will throw a prince just as soon as they'll throw a pauper. So you have to practice and practice and practice. It's the only way you're going to become proficient at riding. Or fencing, using the weapons, swords or a musket or firing a cannon. Napoleon was considered to be the greatest artillerist in history. If I don't know how to fire a cannon, then I'm not going to be a very convincing Napoleon. The same holds true with the horses on these reenactment battlefields, that the cannons are going off and the horse doesn't know it's make-believe, that it's a reenactment. It's frightening to them. So you have to use all your skills to, stay on the horse's back and look as impressive as possible.
When I see you portray those characters, I feel like you just embody them. Little side note, one of my greatest experiences with you, Mark, was even before I even met you personally, and was my birthday a year ago. I went to Colonial Williamsburg by myself, and my birthday's in December. It's like the big first week of December. And I was walking down the street by myself, and you were walking down the street by yourself as Lafayette, and like nobody was really there because it's like a weekday in December. And I felt like this is my birthday present. I get to talk to Lafayette. And you and I talked for like 10 minutes, and I was like, nobody was around. And I'm like, this is the greatest gift.
I remember she came home, because I think it was like a Wednesday. Right? So I was working, and she came home, I came home, and she was riding so high off of that. It was, it was so funny.
Yes.
It was so funny.
That's awesome. Well, happy birthday in advance.
Thank you. Thank you. But I feel like you really do. You embody those characters so well that I really do feel like I'm interacting with the Marquis de Lafayette. Even in today's time, we can pick up the conversation anywhere. I think we spoke about your tour when you came back to America, and toward America later in life. Even though that's not the age you were portraying, we still talked about that time in Lafayette's life. And it's just amazing how much you know and how quickly you're able to jump around and have that conversation. So I think I give you guys a lot of credit for what you do. You make Colonial Williamsburg, for me, that much more enjoyable, and what a great experience being there.
Well, I greatly appreciate that. That's kind of you to say. I think all of us in our team in Colonial Williamsburg, who are part of the nation builders, really, to use an expression that we would use, we're all in. You can't do half
Yeah.
measures. You have to go all the way and not worry about feeling foolish
Yeah.
or silly. But I think most of us would be reading books about the 18th and 19th century anyway, even if we didn't work for Colonial Williamsburg. So there's a genuine passion there and love for history. I often say I didn't choose history. History chose me, because there hasn't been a time where I have not been fascinated with history. It's interesting. I can forget like what I had for breakfast, but when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, wow, today's the 27th. On this day, Napoleon's troops were crossing the Berezina River to get out of Russia during the horrible retreat of 1812. That's what pops into my head. And, I can be forgetful of so many other things, but when it comes to dates and history and great moments in people's lives, I just don't seem to forget them.
Is there a story that stands out to you, like a funny story or something that happened that you were like, I'm never going to forget this, or being at this moment right here and doing this and saying this? Was there a particular moment for you that really resonates as playing either Napoleon or Lafayette?
Sure. In fact, there's many, but I won't trouble you with too many. One really, really great moment in my life was that in 2006, I was contacted by a gentleman who lives in Berlin, Germany, and he wanted to do a publicity stunt for his store, which is called Berlin Story. They sell books and paraphernalia that you can get that's reminiscent of Berlin. And so he flew me over, and what he wanted me to do was get on a white horse as Napoleon and march through the Brandenburg Gate 200 years after Napoleon did it.
Oh my
And he
gosh.
arranged to have the key to the city given to me. Well, this went viral, and there were over 20,000 people there.
Holy
So
cow.
I can show you some pictures, but it was surreal because here I get on this white horse and I've never been on him before. I don't know if he's going to go ballistic, throw me, killed in front of the Brandenburg Gate, but it just worked out perfectly. And the press was so massive, and everybody was pushed up against this horse. I'm surprised he didn't kick or bite, but it just worked. And we had 20,000 Berliners celebrating
Yeah.
one of the worst moments in their history, when Napoleon occupied the city, and they
Oh
gave me
my
the key to this.
gosh.
I had to give it back, of
Sure.
course.
Sure.
But it was such a surreal moment that is imprinted in my mind. What a great opportunity. I will never forget that one. But fortunately, with this Napoleon character, or even Lafayette character, I do get a lot of wonderful opportunities to have these moments that hopefully, God willing, I won't ever forget.
No.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing one. And I can only imagine some of the other opportunities that you've had that are just so unique to what you do.
Yes. Real quick before we dive into the movie, I just want to ask about the uniforms because they're fantastic. And so I know for Colonial Williamsburg, they take care of your uniform, especially the wig Lafayette wears. You have like the best wig makers in the nation who take care of your wig. For Napoleon, you have a couple different ones, right? And you keep one overseas, you keep one here in America. How does that work?
So yes, for Colonial Williamsburg, we have a fantastic team with our historic clothing department. The wig makers are magnificent. They do such a great job. In fact, I have like 3 or 4 different wigs that I use, and we just keep rotating them. But they do a spectacular job, historically accurate and everything. And then the clothing is tailor-made to me. yet another responsibility for portraying these characters. You need to stay as fit as you possibly can to try to really look the part, because nobody wants a chubby Lafayette. So maybe Napoleon in his later years, but I try to keep the 1805 physique as best I can. But with the Napoleon one, yes, I keep a couple of them in Europe, so I don't have to transport them every time and the wear and tear that goes with it. And I have a great team over there that house them, and then they will bring them to the event. So, for example, going to Austerlitz, I will bring a uniform from the United States, but my hat is waiting for me, my saddle is waiting for me, my bridle is waiting for me, and naturally my sword is waiting for me.
Yeah.
I can't bring that on board.
Yeah.
But those were all tailor-made for me. Napoleon had a variety of different uniforms, from the 1790s Italian campaign to the Egyptian campaign, and then the more iconic Chasseur à cheval de la Garde Impériale, the green one, or the Grenadier à pied that he wore usually just on Sundays. So I have all of those, and the, of course, iconic redingote, that gray coat that he quite often wore. So yeah, it takes time to acquire all of those things, to get them tailor-made. And, sometimes they need to be replaced, the breeches or the waistcoat or your stock or your boots. I have a pair of Italian boots that cost me €1,000, but they're worth every penny, because they are Napoleon's boots. They're magnificent.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. And I mean, so we'll talk about the movie, but the costuming in the movie, to me, is reminiscent of the costumes you wear, because you look just as good as what they had in the Napoleon movie. And I do think the costumes of Napoleon should win an Oscar. I mean, they really were amazing. Yeah. But when I see you in your full gala, for Lafayette or for Napoleon, you look just as good. It really is impressive to see you in full uniform.
Thank you. Yeah, again, I think before you even open your mouth on a stage, when you get up on stage, you should already have told the public who you are, and be as confident as you possibly can in those clothes. And the clothes need to look good. If they're ill-fitting, if they're baggy, if they're look like they were worn by your older, bigger brother, then you've lost a little bit of an opportunity to be that much better as that character.
Well, and I know that you just saw the premiere, and now you were in Quebec for the premiere. You portrayed Napoleon.
I was in Montreal.
Montreal. Okay.
Yes. Right. So in the region of Quebec, though.
Okay.
So I did, and then I saw it on opening night here in Williamsburg as well. Very fun. I've seen it twice. I was going to go last night again, and then I told myself not to. So.
Well, we had to kind of trade off kid days and this, that, and the other. But I'm going to give a quick summary for our listeners, just to kind of remind them. So, the movie, directed by Ridley Scott and starring Joaquin Phoenix as Napoleon Bonaparte and Vanessa Kirby as Empress Josephine, Napoleon is a historical epic that explores the rise and fall of the iconic French emperor through the lens of his tumultuous relationship with his wife. Set against the backdrop of the French Revolution, the film chronicles Napoleon's meteoric ascent from a young Corsican artillery officer to Emperor of France, showcasing his military genius and political ambition. However, the film also delves into the complex and often volatile nature of Napoleon's relationship with Josephine, a marriage plagued by infidelity, jealousy, and the pressures of power. Napoleon's relentless pursuit of power and his insatiable desire for glory lead him to conquer much of Europe, but his ambitions ultimately prove to be his undoing. As his empire expands, so does seemingly his ego, and he becomes increasingly isolated and somewhat paranoid, at least in the movie. His disastrous 1812 invasion of Russia marks a turning point, and he's eventually forced to abdicate and exiled to the remote island of Elba. Despite his downfall, Napoleon remains a figure of fascination and intrigue, and the film offers a nuanced and compelling portrait of a man who both shaped and was shaped by history. So I have to ask, what did you guys think? Jen told me a little bit about what she thought, but Mark, what were some of your first thoughts when you got to see it?
So I can't see the forest through the trees.
Yeah.
From the get-go, I was like, no. But I had to let it go
Yep.
because, even films like The Patriot with Mel Gibson, set during the American Revolution in the Southern Theater of Operations, are entertaining,
Yeah.
Mhm.
even if they are not historically accurate.
Yep.
So early on in the film, I had to say, okay, he didn't witness the execution of Marie Antoinette. Okay, in 1793, he didn't get the command for the artillery at Toulon in Paris by Paul Barras.
Mm.
The list kept going on and on and on of these inaccuracies. Even the assault on Toulon didn't occur that way. And there was a brief moment where I thought that they were going to get something very obscure correct when Napoleon goes over the top at the attack at Toulon early in the film, where he was stabbed in the thigh with a pike.
Mm.
And I see him fighting hand-to-hand combat, and it never happened.
Okay.
So it just made me a little bit frustrated. So my thoughts after seeing it for the first time up in Montreal were a little bit disbelief that it's such a great story, the real story.
Yeah.
Why did you want to change it? I thought the underlying theme of this film is that it's a love story.
Yep.
It's a love story between Napoleon and Josephine. And I thought Vanessa Kirby did an outstanding job
She was
in
phenomenal.
the role of Josephine. Really, she showed the many, many layers of the Empress. I don't know if Joachim was directed to portray his Napoleon like that, but he was a bit two-dimensional to me. I think, Napoleon has... there's so much to Napoleon that I don't think you can play him just one way. So I didn't see that coming out of Joachim, either through direction with Ridley Scott or out of his own choices. There were certain things that I just thought were absurd, such as Napoleon leading cavalry charges
Yep.
at Austerlitz and at Waterloo, which
Mhm.
never happened. It just, I'm not quite sure why they put that in. I don't see how it moved the narrative forward with something like that happening. But again, just letting it go. It's fiction,
Yeah.
based upon history,
Mhm.
so why not? Maybe Joachim wanted to lead a cavalry charge. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that when Jen, she saw, I think, opening night,
Yeah.
and she came home, and I was like, okay, yeah, give it to me. She said a bunch of the same stuff that you did, right? And historically, they compress things or they put him in spots where he wasn't
Mhm.
actually, which is relatively typical of some history movies that we talk about. But one of the things that she mentioned specifically that stuck out in my mind that you touched on was they didn't really portray how much his men loved him, like truly loved him as a leader, right? And you had talked about that.
Yeah, so same thing. I feel the same way you do, Mark. Like, I love a good historic movie, even if it's not accurate. If it can really pull me in, like Gladiator, like I can feel for the
Absolutely.
character, I'm all in. And I really wanted them to show the love of Napoleon, because I'm sure you must feel this when you even portray Napoleon. Is this his men loved him, right? And I wanted to see more of like his countrymen loving him. Napoleon did much more than just win wars, right? Napoleon helped, you know, he brought the Rosetta Stone. He helped with the Civil Code of France. Like, he was doing so much with the money system in France. Like, he really wanted to build a country for his people, and people loved him for that. And I couldn't quite see the love of his people. I couldn't quite see, even the love story with him and Josephine. It seemed, I wasn't quite sure, like, there's a codependency going on here. Like, it really was an interesting where I think trying to tell both stories, you didn't tell both stories well. You told both stories okay. I think if you would have tried to go with one or the other, maybe you could have told one really well, but trying to tell both of them, it didn't quite go as well. Although I do believe she's the best Josephine I've ever seen on screen.
She's quite impressive.
She
Yeah.
was. She was. But like you said, like, even in the beginning with Marie Antoinette, I was like, okay, is this Marie Antoinette? Because she did not look like that when she's beheaded, right? She's been in prison for
Yeah,
a
they
year.
cut her hair
They cut her
before she
hair.
went to the guillotine.
Yeah, she's wearing like just a white shift. She looks horrible. And you didn't even have to have Napoleon there. Like, they could have just showed that, and you could have understood what France is going through. And so I was like, okay, so he must be going for some kind of, reaction here with Napoleon there. But then getting into like, he's running away from his people. He's afraid of his people. He's not quite sure how to lead the people. And I'm like, no, that wasn't Napoleon. And so
Yeah,
I felt like that was where Joaquin Phoenix was kind of losing the character. And I think they made him look more like a tyrant.
absolutely.
And he was very enlightened. Like the man loved theater. He loves, to be well versed. He loved literature. He wanted to educate. I mean, think about the Louvre today is where Napoleon lived. It's he brought in all the art. He wanted to have all of that culture in France, and it made him. I didn't see that from the character that he was playing.
100%. The timeline, I think for those who don't really know anything about Napoleon, is going to be a bit of a challenge to follow it, because you start in 1793 in Toulon, yet there was no map that kind of directed you to where Toulon is. If you don't know, it's on the, I mean, you're Navy people, so you do, but it's a southern port in the Mediterranean. But why was it significant? They didn't really play that out. Him watching Marie Antoinette go to the guillotine, okay, you can put him there, but what purpose is it serving? I think the purpose it could have served is Napoleon saying, beware the mob, beware the people and their reactions. They might go to excess. I think that's a great learning moment or teaching moment or revealing moment for who Napoleon was. Then you jump to 1795 and he destroys with what they call the whiff of grape shot, and he fires upon the royalist mob. And then we skip the entire Italian campaign, 1796 and 1797, which is the most pivotal time for him and Josephine.
Yes.
Yeah.
He gets married on March the 9th, 1796, and he goes right after to lead his army. And that's where you could have had that building moment to show him and his men. It could have been nice to have a veteran that was with him in 1796, and then we follow him to 1805 at Austerlitz. Then we follow him to Russia in 1812, and then he maybe dies in 1815. That we see this relationship, why they love this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The pivotal scene when Napoleon returns from Elba and he meets the soldiers of the 5th Regiment. They even get it wrong. I think that the script writer didn't catch it, but he goes, soldiers of my 5th Army. And then in the next scene, he goes, soldiers of my 5th Regiment. I mean, do you not know the difference between regiment and army? My head exploded in the theater. And that scene is so pivotal because, soldiers of the 5th, and he opens up his redingote. Do you recognize me? I am your emperor. If anyone wishes to kill his emperor, here I am. And it was just sloppy. It was poorly done. It could have been done so much better.
Yeah. As Jen and I were chatting a couple of days ago, like I think you pointed out, they could have probably inserted a couple key things that really would have tied it a little bit more together. Even for me, right? I went in, with not knowing a lot of the history. I just assumed like, okay, they're going to compress stuff. I heard a little bit from Jen. But even for me, when they came to that moment when he returned from Elba, I was like, they don't really explain why these people all of a sudden just were like, yeah, sure, we're going to follow you instead. Right? They never really led up to that. They never explained it. It's just like, yep, I'm just going to say a couple words and sure, let's do it, Napoleon. and so even for me, right, the kind of the non-history nerd, as we say often on this podcast, even for me, it missed a couple little things. I felt like they were really close. Now, my one question to you before we started recording, you kind of mentioned the letters between Napoleon and Josephine. Do you think that they got their relationship kind of relatively close? Was it that kind of volatile? Because it seemed pretty volatile in the movie.
I didn't like with the divorce scene which is supposed to take place in 1809, but I think they had it in 1807 when he slapped her. Yeah, that was a no-go. I think when Napoleon met Josephine in 1795 and then married her in 1796, he was the one who was head over heels for her. She was not so into him. I think it was a marriage of convenience, and she, just survived the terror of the revolution. But when he goes on that Italian campaign, these letters that he writes, sometimes 3 or 4 per day, sometimes 2 or 3 sentences, are so passionate. They are so loving. He absolutely adores her. And when they did get it right when Napoleon was in Egypt and his friend Junot tells him of Josephine's infidelity with Hippolyte Charles,
Okay.
and that crushed him. But all throughout the movie, they made it seem like, oh, well, Napoleon is leaving Egypt because he's upset at Josephine with her lover, Hippolyte Charles, and he has to go back to France. Or when he's on Elba, he's worried about Josephine's health, so he has to escape from Elba. Those are not the reasons that he
Mhm.
did those things. But I think what they were trying to do was in the scenes of Napoleon and Josephine together, the lovemaking scenes and stuff like that. I think they were trying to show that passion, but it really did not come across as the passion from the letters. It made him look like a little bit of a monster
Yeah.
with her, and I don't think that's, again, it's historical fiction based on
Mhm.
fact, but I don't think he got that right.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. It made him look like a brute with her, and he
Yeah.
wasn't that way with her. And she had already passed by the time he goes to Elba. And so that was interesting that they had done that. I was like, oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting timeline there. And like you said, he didn't hit her during the divorce. He never would have done that. And honestly, the infidelities, I try to stress with people, it's French. And I'm not trying to say that the French people for infidelity is the norm, but infidelity is very accepted, especially with royalty. And so much so when you think of Dubarry, who has such a status place, the mistress to Louis the 14th, like it's a status place to be a mistress. And that's even what Josephine was when he first meets her. She was a mistress to a political, high standing
Paul
political.
Berat, yeah.
And so the infidelity, even though he's heartbroken about her infidelity, he's also being, he's not being faithful either. I think the biggest thing for them was they were never able to have a child and together. And so, and I don't know what it was. People not sure exactly why. I give a lot of different reasons, especially with Napoleon being gone a lot. And she's in her 30s when they marry, and then he's gone for long periods of time because they can never conceive a child. And then he does have some children out of wedlock, so he can have children. It's that whole idea, and that is another royal idea, that you have to have a legitimate heir. And
Right.
because he's emperor, he needs to secure this lineage with a legitimate heir. And so that's the heartbreak, that they are a power couple together. Even, she has come to really believe and trust in him. He has come to believe and trust in her. She's given him political access, help him climb. He's given her protection, helped her climb. She became Empress of France. And they really do appreciate who they are to each other, plus the love, which I love, Mark. We're all military. I tell people, when you're deployed or when you're away from somebody, boy, that love will come flowing out.
Absolutely, yeah.
You appreciate someone so much more when you're not together.
That's right. That's right.
That's why I think
Isn't
those
that
love
the truth?
letters, they're the first love letters. Like everyone in deployment who's writing their love letters home via email, look at Napoleon's writing Josephine.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm with you on that. That's so true. I think it hurt Napoleon so badly when he heard about the Hippolyte Charles, and I don't think he was ever the same with her.
Mhm.
But I do think once Josephine put aside that lover, she didn't have any more, whereas Napoleon did.
Mhm.
In that 1802 time period when he becomes consul for life and then emperor. They have that window of I think happiness.
Mhm.
He's just become emperor. He's made her empress. He fights the Battle of Austerlitz, his greatest victory. He
Mhm.
then defeats the Prussians at Jena and Auerstadt and takes Berlin. But it was the Polish campaign where he met that, and they didn't even bring her up,
No.
Maria Walewska,
Mhm.
and he had a child with her as well. And by that time, I think Napoleon realized that Josephine was incapable of having any more children. And for the purpose of, the lineage, he was going to have to marry somebody who could have a child. But, everything went downhill after that.
Mhm.
It's interesting to note because they used to call Josephine Our Lady of Victories. The soldiers used to call her that. And, he did have his meteoric rise from 1795 till he divorces her in 1809. And after 1809, things just start to fall apart. And I've often wondered about that, the luck that Josephine brought with Napoleon, because 1809 campaign did not go terribly well. Spain 1810-11 was not going well. 1812 goes without saying. 1813, 14, 15, things just really went downhill. So I think it's also telling Napoleon's last words for the l'armée, tête l'armée, Josephine. Last word he said, Josephine. I think that really speaks volumes.
I love hearing you say that stuff in French. Okay, so and I agree with you that let's touch one more thing. What they could have done better. Let's go to what they did right. They should have had a map, Mark. They should have had a map to show Napoleon's empire, and then they should have, because I think that's impressive too. We should have been able to see
give you the scale,
right? Like what he's doing across Europe. And
so how many people know where Austerlitz is?
Yeah.
I mean, really, do people know it's in the Czech Republic?
Yeah, exactly.
And there was no Czech Republic in the time period of Napoleon. It's all part of Moravia or Bohemia, part of the Austrian Empire. So I think, just for context, crawl, walk, run. Let's make it simple for everybody who's watching this, from the Napoleonic scholar to the guy who's never heard of Napoleon before.
Yeah,
absolutely. So what did they get right? What was something you're like, this is awesome? Like, I talked a little bit about the costumes, but I mean, those fight scenes, Mark, and I wanted to ask you about the horse. When he gets the cannonball out of the horse, but did that really happen? I was like, I have to ask Mark about this. Yeah.
I mean, he had several horses killed from under him, but I'd never seen that before. That was all Hollywood at its best. And then him reaching his hand to pull out, it looked like it was a 3-pounder, or maybe I think it was a 3-pounder that he pulls out of the horse. That was interesting, an interesting choice. So the battle scenes were not accurate.
Okay. Yes.
They were not.
No.
So Austerlitz was fascinating because I've been to that battlefield more than any other battlefield in my life. And, I've gone over the terrain, and that's okay if you don't want to get the terrain. But the key problem with the battle scenes is that they kept putting up these French tents. Now, Napoleon had a campaign tent that he would stay in periodically as they were on the march. And some of the there was a whole layout of tents and stuff like that. But the tents would never be found right on the battle lines. And that seems to be what Ridley Scott did with both Austerlitz, Borodino in Russia, and with Waterloo.
Oh, yeah.
And also the men creating these entrenchments. Yes, in some Napoleonic battles, they did put up entrenchments, the use of the gabillons and defense works and earthworks and things like that, but not for Austerlitz. Austerlitz was it's a massive battlefield, and it was a battle of maneuver, and then a battle of annihilation at the end. And I just don't think the whole idea with the lakes and him firing upon the lakes. Yes, those lakes are in the southern portion of the battlefield. They have since been drained, and an archaeological dig was done in which they unearthed 3 bodies. 3.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
And I think the skeletal remains of a horse. So were those ponds destroyed by cannon? Probably during the battle. But did they inflict the carnage that the movie showed? No, they did not.
I see. Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, the one thing I will say, right, kind of being, even for our YouTube channel, for Walk with History, kind of being the guy behind the scenes and, trying my hand at hobbyist cinematography, right? What I can teach myself. I did appreciate that. I mean, just the kind of the grand scale. That's why I really made the effort to go see it in the theater. This is absolutely like a go see it in the theater type of movie. I love I do love the grandiose feel of those battle scenes. Whether or not they're accurate, I had no idea, right? But I did appreciate them just purely from kind of like a Hollywood
Sure.
perspective of getting the scale and really honestly like some of the carnage, and one of the things that I was actually curious about was some of the battle tactics at the end when they were doing the horse charge, and then I think it was the British that all of a sudden they kind of closed ranks around and the horses were
They
running
form
around them.
squares.
Was
Yeah.
is that
Yes.
an actual tactic?
That's an actual tactic, and that was what was done at the battlefield of Waterloo. But it's interesting to note that in the film, the British come out of their entrenchments to form square, where the reality, if they had those entrenchments, they would probably be far safer in the entrenchments fending off cavalry than coming out dramatically and forming squares. So the British did form square at Waterloo, and the French cavalry charged like 11 times, and they didn't break the squares.
Wow.
So it was a pivotal moment in the battle, and the reason the cavalry charged was because Wellington, the Duke of Wellington, who commanded the British forces, he actually told his entire battle line to do an about face and to fall back 100 paces. The French, Napoleon was ill during the Battle of Waterloo, and he left it to one of his subordinates, Marshal Ney. And when Ney saw them falling back, he thought they were in full retreat. So he immediately ordered the cavalry charge to pursue, which is the proper thing to do when you see an enemy retreating. You pursue them without letting them regroup or reform. That's one of the great roles of cavalry. But it turns out that they were just retiring because they were getting such a pounding from the French artillery. And then they were able to successfully form squares and fend off the French cavalry.
Yeah,
That
and
makes
to
sense.
me, that's just something that kind of stuck out to me, because it was just something I hadn't seen before,
Sure.
and I wondered if that was one of the accurate things. So that's actually kind of pretty neat to know.
Well, I had read that Ridley Scott, the reason why he fires the cannons onto the pyramids that never happened is he just
No.
wanted to portray that Napoleon took Egypt. And I'm like, okay, you probably could have portrayed that with him finding the Rosetta Stone. Here you go.
Yeah,
I took
sure.
Egypt. I found the
Yeah.
Rosetta Stone. So without doing the cannons, but again, cinematography. And I read with the men dying in the water and so dramatically, he wanted to show how Napoleon had no regard for life.
Hmm.
And
Oh.
even right. And even at the end of the movie, when they talk about all the lives lost and all the battles, that was really what Ridley Scott wanted to hit you with, was how much Napoleon had no regard for his soldiers' lives. And I'm like, what? Like,
Yeah, he didn't explain that terribly well, and I think those statistics were taken out of context too.
Mhm.
The whole idea of him firing upon the pyramids, whatever, it's dramatic effect. It seemed like he was bored.
Yeah.
Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal of Napoleon in that particular scene, as the Mamelukes and the Ottomans were like doing their rallying to about to fight the French, and then he fires at the top of the pyramids, and they collapse on the Mamelukes and kill some of them. They forget to tell you that he brought 150 people to study Egypt. It is the foundation for Egyptology. You've already brought up the Rosetta Stone,
Yep.
which will be deciphered by a Frenchman, Champollion. And, so many discoveries were made on that Egyptian campaign. And he didn't have to bring these 150 savants to do the study, but he did, because he was an enlightened man who wanted to discover more about this forgotten civilization. And thanks to that, we now know the history of ancient Egypt and all that occurred. And we've deciphered the hieroglyphs. And, a lot of these great pieces from antiquity in Egypt are for us to learn about. I did like the scene where they uncover the sarcophagus and Napoleon puts the hat. There is a lithograph of Napoleon doing that.
Oh,
and
really?
He's staring with his arms like this, and he's staring. I think maybe, without the caption there, it doesn't say anything, but I think maybe he's reflecting upon history, that I too will be like this mummy here thousands of years? Will I be remembered? Will I be forgotten? What impact will I have? So I really enjoyed that scene a tremendous amount. I did also like to see the gentleman of color who was one of his generals, because that's true. You had Mathieu Dumas, one of his cavalry commanders, who was there. So I'm glad they showed him. So, that transition in uniforms from the French Revolutionary uniform, which was the blue with the gold embroidery upon the red collar and cuffs, that was nicely done. They showed that transition through time. They also showed the transition with his hair. He did keep long hair until he comes back for the coup, and then he cuts it, and they call him le petit tendu, the little shaven one. So, but he cuts it in that Roman style, which is so very popular, a la Titus, as they called it in that time period. So, yeah, those things looked good. The one scene with Josephine's son, Eugène de Beauharnais, wanting to get his father's saber back. There's two versions to that. One is he's bringing his father's saber to give to Napoleon. The other, obviously, in this movie, he's taking it back. But the challenge of all those sabers in that room, the one they pick is actually an 1813 model, and it was supposed to be 1794.
Oh, that's funny.
So, I mean, I think I know that, and maybe 10 other guys know that, but I was like, oh my gosh, of the one you pick, I actually have a reproduction of it. I was like, wow.
That's hilarious. Well, it's just like whenever Jen watches Navy movies and there's a helicopter in there, she'll always say like, a helicopter wouldn't do that, or they wouldn't do that. It's like, Jen, it's a movie. Like, give it up.
I know it's hard, but then you just enjoy it for the cinematic version of it.
Yeah.
So, okay, Mark, overall, out of 4 stars, is it like a 3-star? Is it a 2-star? What are you thinking?
So if we're going to use your 4-star rating system, I'm going to give it 1 star.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So what is your best depiction of Napoleon then? If you could say someone could watch a movie.
So there are several. And in fact, Le Figaro magazine newspaper, one of the biggest ones in France, did a listing of the 100 best Napoleons in film.
Oh my gosh.
I don't want to brag, but I made number 27.
All right.
in my role with Vincent Cassel in the Emperor of Paris, and Joaquin Phoenix was 28.
There we go.
That's awesome.
There you go.
A little feather in your cap there.
Exactly. So of the Napoleon films, my favorite film of all time is the 1927 silent film called Napoleon. And that was directed by Abel Gance, and it was starring a man named Albert Dieudonné. And he really just nails that early Napoleon, that 17 from Toulon to the Royalist uprising in 95 to the Italian campaign. That's really where it ends. But wow, he looks the part very well.
I'm sorry, is that American made?
Well, Francis Ford Coppola remastered it because, again, a 1927 silent film. He remastered it in, I think, 1981 or 1983.
Okay.
It's being worked on again, and I think they're going to do another theatrical release, which would be wonderful. But when that's going to come, I don't know. But that's I have it on VHS. That nobody's put it on DVD, which is just very bizarre. But there's also another film directed by Abel Gance, and it's called Austerlitz. And it's all about that battle, and it stars Pierre Mondy, who does a stellar performance as Napoleon. Another Napoleon that I like is the 1956 War and Peace with Audrey Hepburn and Henry Fonda.
Yep.
And that Napoleon is a Czech actor named Herbert Lohm, who I think nails it. There's, of course, crowd favorites like Rod Steiger in the 1970 movie called Waterloo, which is all about that battle. That's Scott, if you want to see what the squares actually look like how the battle actually unfolded, and I do have it on DVD if you'd like to borrow that. It's magnificent. Though Rod Steiger doesn't really look so much like Napoleon, I think he still gave Napoleon the credit that was due him. And there's, of course, Napoleon and Josephine, a love story, which was made for
That's
television
my
back in
favorite.
1987. Armand de Sante
Yes.
kills it.
Yes.
He's awesome. And Jacqueline Bisset as Josephine, she does a super job. So yeah, there's a few out there, and then there's a few bad ones too.
Yeah. So 1 star. Okay. So I think, hearing you say 1 star, I think I was going to do 2, but I'm thinking I'm 1.5 now.
Yeah.
How about you, Scott? How do you feel?
So 4 stars doesn't compute to me. I'm used to a 5-star scale. But if we're going to go with 4 stars, I'll say 2, just because I kind of just, for the general, the average moviegoer, the cinematography. And even though, to me, again, not kind of knowing the history or the facts or kind of what was right or what was wrong, like there was stuff that was it just felt like it was missing, that tying the story together. But I did enjoy just kind of the representation of the era, right? Of showing Napoleon, the costumes and the kind of the battles, and a lot of that stuff was just again the pure Hollywood movie kind of bigness of it. For lack of a more sophisticated way to describe a movie.
I know.
I did enjoy that aspect of it.
Just missed the mark. And honestly, Mark, he doesn't even talk with a French accent. It's like, hey, what's up? I'm Napoleon.
Yeah, it was a little bit of an LA accent, I think.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Maybe we can revisit this scaling system, because supposedly Apple TV is going to put out a 4-hour version of this.
Oh, okay.
Have you heard about that?
Yes, the director's cut.
Oh, are they?
A director's cut, which maybe will be more inclusive to help the narrative along. And, maybe we will see him talking about his reforms, the Code Civil or the Code Napoleon, the creation of the Banque de France, institutes for higher learning.
Yeah, keep an eye out for that.
All those things would be interesting. And maybe the Italian campaign, that would be nice. Maybe some of those love letters, because that's when he wrote all of those love letters. Maybe the Marengo campaign of 1800, after he gets back from Egypt and the Austrians had taken back all that he had conquered in 1796 and 97. Maybe the reasoning behind why Austerlitz was fought, throwing out the Navy, that nobody talked about Trafalgar, or that was really the catalyst that brought Napoleon from the coast to invade England, to go inland into Eastern Europe to fight the Austrians and the Russians at Austerlitz. So, yeah, I mean, it would be nice if he could introduce some of those different things to help with the narrative. I think that would be very helpful for a guest or someone watching that doesn't really know too much about Napoleon.
Yeah. We'll have to revisit
well, hopefully,
that.
if he listens to this podcast before he does his cut, he can edit all of that.
I'm sure it's already.
If Ridley is watching this, I love Ridley Scott. I think he's a brilliant director.
Yes.
The Duelists is his first major motion picture that came out in 1977. Still one of my favorites, based on a Joseph Conrad short story called The Duel. I love Gladiator. I love
Gladiator.
Kingdom of Heaven. Black Hawk Down. I mean, fantastic. So I certainly don't want Ridley to hate me for only giving him 1 star. And as far as Joaquin Phoenix, he doesn't need my approval or not. He's a great actor. He's an Academy Award winner. Just again, I can't see the forest through the trees. I talk about Napoleon every single day. I've got his books all around me, so I think I'm just too involved there. But if Vanessa Kirby is watching, she was fabulous.
I think a lot of people, and again, I don't go online and read like movie reviews and all that stuff, but I think a lot of people will kind of agree with that general sentiment. I mean, Joaquin Phoenix, nobody's going to argue that the director and the actors are all incredible.
Yeah.
But I do think that I think she stole the show.
Yeah.
Between the larger than life characters that were in this movie. Even to me, again, not knowing this, she was incredible. She played all the parts, all the different stages very well. And to me, honestly, her character probably felt the most believable.
Yes.
And that, my friends, wraps up our deep dive into Ridley Scott's epic portrayal of Napoleon Bonaparte. It's a film that, like its protagonist, is ambitious, complex, and bound to spark debate. We've sifted through the historical facts and cinematic flourishes, explored the director's vision, and delved into the nuances of Napoleon's character. Now, whether you're a history buff or a film enthusiast or simply captivated by larger-than-life figures, we hope this episode has shed some light on this captivating portrayal of one of history's most fascinating figures. We encourage you to continue the conversation. Let us know in the comments on YouTube, and let us know what you thought about the movie. Now, Mark, for those who might want to find you or your work, is there a kind of a best place for people to kind of either reach out to you or find you online?
Absolutely. So at Colonial Williamsburg, if you'd like to see the Marquis de Lafayette, we have our schedule online, so you can find out when I'm doing what we call public audiences or when I'm in town. I'm usually in town 5 days a week. But this weekend coming up, if you are in the Czech Republic, in the southeastern corner by Brno, I will be Napoleon at the Battle of Austerlitz, his greatest victory. So come out, turn out for that. You can follow me on Instagram, Napoleon in America, and I put up all pictures and videos of the different things that I do in character. So
Awesome.
Look for me there.
Yeah, well, thank you so much again for joining us, Mark. And for those listening, remember to reach out to us at our website, talkwithhistory.com. But more importantly, if you know someone else that might enjoy this podcast, please share it with them, especially if you think today's Napoleon topic would interest a friend. Even if they haven't seen the movie, or especially if they have seen the movie, you got to send this episode to them. Shoot them a text, tell them to look us up. We rely on you, our community, to grow, and we appreciate you all every day. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.